Plains wars of the post-Civil War era witnessed some of the bloodiest combat between the American government and the Native American tribes battling for their way of life, although they are largely neglected by military historians, but not Native American historians. Here are the 5 Native American tribes the U.S. Army is most anxious about. Number 5. Cheyenne. As more people moved into the region around the Rocky Mountains, there was a subsequent increase in the number of strongly armed militias in the region. These militias would frequently invade the nearby Arapaho and Cheyenne tribe communities. The Cheyenne people, in response, started fighting back and establishing various types of warrior bands, including the now famous Dog Soldiers, who were warriors who would stand their ground no matter what was thrown at them. The Dog Soldiers were responsible for bringing together members of the Cheyenne and Arapaho tribes in order to wreak havoc on the Colorado ranching business. Number 4. Kiowa. Because they were an ally of the feared Comanche, the Kiowa were almost always at war with everyone else that the Comanche were fighting, and this included the United States Army. The Kiowa went westward from the central United States over a period of 50 years to join the Comanche in committing raids and engaging in trade from the American Southwest into Mexico, during which time they were responsible for the deaths of thousands of people. Even when the majority of the Kiowa migrated to reservations in the year 1877, many warrior bands continued to roam freely throughout the American frontier. Number 3. Apache. Fighting the many Native American Apache tribes was the one thing that the Union and Confederate armies could agree on during the American Civil War. In the early days of the American Civil War, Confederate forces engaged in combat with Apache tribes in the western part of the country before being transferred to the conflict that they were actually needed to fight. Clans of Apache only occasionally came together in large numbers. They did it for the sole purpose of amassing their forces so that they could attack the United States Army in massive formations. Because the United States Army despised the Apaches so much, whenever they ran into one of their groups, no matter how large or small, they engaged in combat out of fear that the Apaches were gathering enough people to launch an attack. More than 2 decades of concerted effort were required to put an end to the Apaches' resistance. Number 2. Sioux. Although they were not the first or the last tribe to engage in conflict with the United States government, the Sioux are perhaps the most well-known of those who did so. Little Bighorn, Custer's Last Stand, Red Cloud, Sitting Bull, and Crazy Horse are just a few of the illustrious names and locations associated with the Sioux during the entirety of the Indian Wars. Before the middle of the 17th century, the Santee Sioux lived in the area around Lake Superior, where they gathered wild rice and other foods, hunted deer and buffalo, and speared fish from canoes. Prolonged and continual warfare with the Ojibwa to their east drove the Santee into what is now southern and western Minnesota, at that time the territory of the agricultural Teton and Yankton. In turn, the Santee forced these 2 groups from Minnesota into what are now North and South Dakota. Number 1. Comanche. The Comanches were able to thwart the Army's attempts to eliminate or contain them, and they also defeated other Native American tribes, either completely wiping them out or forcing them to abandon their homelands. As a result of the resistance of the Comanches, the Spanish Empire halted its northward expansion. Because of the Comanches, the Texan Republic was forced to halt its westward expansion. Because of the Comanches, the frontier in the United States really shrank. President Grant, U.S. Army Commander William Tecumseh Sherman, and General Philip Sheridan, all of whom had been instrumental in the Union's victory in the Civil War, were again in power and were intent on eliminating the Comanche menace, which they did by crushing it in 1875.